Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are tuning in from. I'm so glad you are here. My name is Amy Burden, and I am a English language specialist in Peru. And you are tuning into the October RELO Andes webinar, Tech Smart Grammar: Enhancing Language Learning with Online Tools. As I said, I'm Amy Simpson Burden. I'm an English language specialist working in Peru, and I live in upstate South Carolina in the United States, and I am your host for this month's webinar. So let me know, where are you listening from today? Where are you right now tuning in to this webinar? I look forward to meeting you and learning where you are. Please write that in the chat. So while you are putting that in the chat, I want to remind you that these webinars happen every month. On the third Thursday of every month, right here on the RELO Andes Facebook page. I or another English language fellow or specialist will be here to talk with you about something related to English language teaching. So the third Thursday of every month, 2 p.m. Lima time, right here on the RELO Andes Facebook page. Looks like we've got a lot of people tuning in today. I'm so excited. Diana is here from Ancon, Peru. Alinka is here from Chiclayo. Tatiana from Lima. I'm excited to have several Peruvian viewers today. Brenda, also from Peru. Thanks so much for joining in today. Janet is here as well. Thank you for joining our webinar. From Arequipa. A few years ago, I had some friends from Arequipa who gave me a magnet that I have on my refrigerator right now that has the Arequipa logo on it. Just a reminder too, and I'll remind you at the end of the webinar as well, but on Friday, so tomorrow at the same time, I will be live on Zoom. There will be a link on the RELO Andes Facebook page where you can click to join me. I'd like to talk about more AI tools that I use in my teaching and find out what tools you use in your teaching. We can try some out together on Zoom. So please join me on Zoom tomorrow, same time, 2 p.m. Lima time, so we can try out some tech tools together and talk through how you use social media and AI in your teaching, as well as what's worked for me, and just share some best practices together tomorrow at 2 p.m. Hi, Catherine. I'm so glad you're here. All right. Well, let's talk about what today's topic is. We are going to focus on some of the best practices in teaching grammar, some 21st century best practices, and I'll touch on both how we can use AI as a teaching tool to help us teach grammar effectively and efficiently, as well as some of the ways that social media can be used to teach grammar effectively. There's so many online platforms now, and our students are using different ones depending on their interests. And so, how can we harness what our students are already using outside the classroom to help us with our grammar instruction? So that's going to be the topic for today. And if you're interested in further reading, further learning about how you can enhance your classroom instruction using online tools, check out the English Teaching Forum, Volume 58, Number 3. It's on the American English at State website, and it's full of tips for enhancing your teaching with technology. So I hope you'll check that out to get some more ideas that have worked in classrooms all around the world to enhance your teaching with technology. All right, so I want to hear from you some more. We're going to talk about best practices for teaching grammar. When you hear the word grammar, what do you think of? Can you finish that sentence in the chat? When I hear the word grammar, I think of. Can you finish that sentence in the chat? Hi, Patricia. Hi, Wilma. Rules and structures. When I hear the word grammar, I think of rules and structures. Structures. Patricia says structures. Challenge. Yes. Both in learning and in teaching. I agree. Sentence structures. The skeleton of a language. I like the imagery that that phrase brings up in my mind. The skeleton of a language. Yes. Thank you, Liliana. These are some great answers. I'm really glad that you are thinking this through and sharing your thoughts with me. I really appreciate it. Accuracy. Yeah. We're going to talk about that on the next slide. Thank you. So when I hear the word grammar, I think of, I think I agree. I think of rules a lot. When I hear the word grammar, I think of um, conjugations. That's a big thing that I think of when I think of grammar. All right, so let's talk through some of those best practices in teaching grammar. Now that we've got our thoughts together on the first thing that comes to your mind when you're thinking about grammar, um, let's talk through some best practices. So I've got some a couple of statements that I'll put up that have to do with two ideas or ideas that are kind of competing with each other in grammar teaching. The first is should we teach grammar with form focused instruction? And should it be reactive or proactive? So, teaching grammar has become really popular among adults who want to improve their grammar skills and remember what they've learned. As long as it's part of real communication, as long as it's part of meaningful language. So I've got this chart here on the screen that has form, meaning, and use. So as long as it's part of that meaningful language. So the method that I'll bring up first is focus on form or form focused instruction. And what that means is that while the main goal is to understand, to communicate, grammar is also is important for those two things. So by teaching grammar, learners pay attention to the forms they use, how it is formed, or accuracy, as we were just talking in the chat. Learners pay attention to accuracy while they're communicating. Teachers have to decide which grammar rules to teach in their classes. And so that kind of gets back to the rules that we were talking about in the chat. And they can choose to either teach a rule, maybe because their students are having trouble with it. That's the reactive approach. So I know my students struggle with this rule, so I'm going to focus on it. That's a reactive approach. Or they might choose to teach a rule before students are expected to begin using it in the classroom. That's more of a proactive approach. You may know that in the next school year, they'll need to know how to use this form or this rule, so you're going to introduce it on purpose now. Proactive approach. So some people argue about whether it's better to teach grammar rules or the grammar form before or after students begin to struggle with it. But most teachers use a little bit of both approaches to help their students learn. They mix both reacting to what their students need right now, and they mix preparing them for what's coming next, the reactive and proactive approaches. Next, in teaching grammar, we have input-based approaches and output-based approaches. So another important aspect of grammar teaching involves input activities. Those are activities that give students real life examples of grammar forms, and output activities where students practice using real grammar forms appropriately and meaningfully. So that gets into another part of grammar teaching. The use, when, why is it used, the appropriateness. All three of these things are important for grammar teaching. And so teachers have to consider when to focus on form, reactively or proactively. Teachers need to consider when to focus on input, giving their students lots of examples of when, why, and how to use it, and mixing that in with activities that let their students practice using it in a meaningful way. What does it mean? And in an appropriate way. When and why is it used? So just like deciding to use proactive and reactive approaches, researchers believe differently on what's more effective of to focus on input or focus on output. But teachers use both. There's a webinar on AE Live called Effective Grammar Teaching, Balancing Input and Output that you can check out on YouTube, that will give you more advice on using input and output approaches in your classroom. But teachers are interested in helping their students use grammar more accurately, more meaningfully, and appropriately. So it's not about finding the best or the most effective way to teach grammar, but it's about making informed decisions based on the purpose that your students have for learning and what their needs are. So the last practice that we're going to talk about in teaching grammar is implicit and explicit grammar teaching. So a grammar teacher needs that grammar knowledge. I know we mentioned in the chat how challenging grammar is, both in teaching and learning a language. So a good grammar teacher needs that grammar knowledge in order to respond to students' questions, and respond to students when they speak or write in English, and to give good, high quality feedback to their students. Many students, especially adult students, enjoy having grammar knowledge too. They've got an understanding of the grammar in their first language or their home language, so they can make those comparisons more easily than perhaps a child learner can. And so they enjoy having that grammar knowledge. That's called explicit grammar teaching, when we teach the grammar knowledge. However, relying too much on explicit grammar teaching. That just means saying things like, here's the rules. Now let's use them. Um, Relying too much on that can bore your students. They can feel bored in your classroom. It can even lead to confusion. So teachers need a balance here as well. They need clear explanations with many examples, many tries at using the language in those meaningful ways. So the goal of grammar teaching is not to teach grammar rules, but to help students use language in accurate, so focusing on form, meaningful, what does it mean when I say it like this, and appropriate. When and why do I say it the way I do? Having some grammar knowledge is going to help students to notice when and how grammar is used. It will help them to notice a mismatch between their knowledge of a rule and their ability to use that rule in a meaningful way. So, just like with these other approaches, a mixture is going to be what's best in your classroom and responding to the needs of your learners. So now that we are kind of all on the same page about some of the best practices in teaching grammar, let's start to consider how we can use online tools to take something that's very challenging, that is often confusing and sometimes boring, and enhance our grammar teaching using, let's look first at AI. So there's pros and cons to any new tech tool. This is also true for AI or artificial intelligence. So, AI can provide immediate or feedback right away on a student's work. That can be really helpful for self paced learning, for allowing your learners to move at their own speed. AI can be customized to meet the needs of individual students, can be really helpful if you've got a large classroom. It can adapt to students' strengths and weaknesses, and AI can be used to create really engaging, really interactive learning activities. AI is also, if you choose to use AI in your classroom, you can help to prepare your students for the workplace. In just a few short years, more and more of our workplaces are going to ask their workers to use AI in the workplace. So when we teach our students how to use AI responsibly now, we're preparing them to be better at their jobs in the future. A lot of educators use AI in lesson planning. I'll show you how I've used AI in lesson planning in just a minute. They also use it in grading, and I'll show you how I've used AI to help me grade. And they use it as a grammar resource, so to provide examples for their students. How many of us have stood at the front of the classroom and tried to come up with examples of a form or of a particular meaning or use? Using certain kinds of AI can help us come up with real world examples without standing in front of the classroom thinking and trying to come up with things on the fly. There are some cons to using AI in the classroom that we need to be aware of as language teachers. Some AI is getting better, it is improving all the time. However, there is bias against certain accents and certain writing styles. So, for example, many language learners, when they write with their grammar book open, they write with their dictionary open. And so their writing might look to a computer it might look inauthentic or fake. And so an AI might say, this is plagiarized, or this is not real. This was not made by a student. But they're not thinking, because it's a computer, that as students learn languages, they write like a dictionary, they write like a grammar book until they get the hang of this new form or this new writing style. And then more of their personalities come into their writing. So that's something to consider if you use AI to help you grade student papers, is that it may not understand language learner writing. Accents. If you use AI to help you grade a student presentation, AI is improving, but it might have trouble with certain accented speech. And so that could produce, a lower grade from the AI platform, or it might flag a certain word as inappropriate when it's not. It's because AI is still learning how to understand human speech. Another con of using artificial intelligence in your classroom can be a misuse of student information. So, for example, it's fun to use your students' names in writing samples. Write an essay about, and use a student's name. But if you're not sure what website you're putting student information into, it can be misused by that website. That information can go to companies that we don't understand and we don't know. So you have to be very careful when you use grading in AI, or when you give AI student names, that the company or the website you're using is something that's trustworthy, and make decisions based on the rules that your school has for using student information. Not all AI is free. Some of it is very expensive. I will show you tools that have either a free version or are completely free today, but not all AI is free, unfortunately. Sometimes AI can be inaccurate. Sometimes it can suggest a grammar form, and you look at it and you go, no, no one would say it that way, or no one would write it that way. Or it might suggest a synonym for a word that just doesn't fit, that doesn't look right. So you are still very necessary as an English teacher to go back and review anything that AI writes to be sure that it's accurate in terms of grammar. So AI is a tool, but it is not a decision maker. You are still the decision maker in your classroom. So let's look at how we can use AI to help us be good decision makers in the grammar classroom. So AI can add to instruction. It can enhance instructional activities in multiple ways. So one example is using ChatGPT to come up with examples for you in your grammar activities, instead of using the same examples every time you teach a form, because that's what's in the book, or having to come up with your own examples. You can ask ChatGPT to write 10 sentences that use the verb go, for example, and use those in your grammar activities. I use Grammarly. There's a free version. I use Grammarly to make activities, and I use Grammarly to check my students' writing. They have the ability to make a report that has a list of student errors. You have to check it because it's not always accurate, but it helps me to focus on my students' content in their writing, because Grammarly is focusing on punctuation and spelling for me. So I can focus on the things that really require my time. Canva, um, Canva AI, that one's kind of new. Educators can use Canva for free, and you can make really high quality presentations by just telling Canva, typing in on Canva what you want your presentation to look like, and it will make it for you. You can do this with pictures, videos, any of the tools on Canva's website can help you make more engaging presentations for different grammar topics. I mentioned earlier that a lot of teachers use AI for lesson planning. So I'll show you how that works in just a moment. I've got a video that I want to share. But there is a website called Almanac that lets you create assessments, worksheets, activities, so quickly. You need to check them for accuracy and probably improve them because they're a little bit boring, but it's a good start to creating assessments and activities. A website called Bedtime Story AI. You can create reading and listening passages by giving Bedtime Story AI a few details about what you want the story to include, and then they'll create a story for you that you can use for reading and listening. And yes, you can tell bedtime story to write in the past tense or the future tense or historical tenses. You can tell bedtime story AI what kind of grammar form to focus on in your reading or listening passage. I have used ChatGPT with the Common Core standards in the USA to create standards aligned lessons. I can tell ChatGPT the name of the standard and the grade level, and it will come up with a lesson plan that I can adapt and modify to make it work for my classroom. I also use Google Bard. It's free and I have it open almost all the time. When I need to explain something to students who are A1, A2 proficiency or B1, B2 proficiency, I can write out what I want to say in Google Bard and then ask Google Bard to rewrite it on B1, and then I can have that email ready to go to a student so that their feedback is tailored to their language ability. I also use it to help me better understand what I'm about to teach. So we've talked about how challenging grammar is. Sometimes I will just go, Google Bard, explain to me the superlative tense, and Google Bard can write out an explanation of the superlative. It's a good reminder for me. I can take it into my classroom and I have increased grammar knowledge when I walk into the classroom that I can use to respond to students, to focus on form. So I really like Google Bard for that. And finally, Bing Image Creator is free, and you can type in a sentence and it will create a picture for you from that sentence. So you can really enhance your grammar presentations with pictures that are very specific. And you also won't be breaking any rules about using copyrighted pictures. So I really appreciate that. So let's look at some examples. So this is, let's see if I can get it started. This is a video of me using Grammarly. I'm focusing on modals. So I asked Grammarly to write an email to a boss asking for a raise. And so you see that Grammarly is creating an email for me. On the side of the screen, there are tips on how to make the email better, how to improve it, both with grammar and spelling and punctuation. But I want my students to focus on modals, the should, could, would, must. So I can use all the different tips on Grammarly for how to improve this email, or I can ask my students to take a look at this email and make their own suggestions for how to make it more polite or more persuasive or more assertive. And students can make those changes to the modal verbs to use more assertive modals. And I can create these emails, different emails, some that are more polite, some that are more assertive, very quickly in Grammarly. And then I have my own list that Grammarly made for me of some possible ways to improve the writing. So after my students brainstorm how to improve the writing, I have a list that Grammarly made for me that I can ask students, what do you think about X? What do you think about using the verb should right here? Would it make it more polite? Would it make it more persuasive? What changes can we make to the writing? So this is one way that you can use Grammarly in your classroom to focus on form, meaning, and use all together with your students. And this also helps them as they think about going into the workplace and how to use these modals appropriately. Let's look at another example. So this is Almanac. So you can see very quickly how I was able to create a worksheet. So again, I'm focusing on modals. I typed in the grammar focus, and then Almanac came up with some objectives. And I said, sure, these objectives are great. And then I typed in what parts of the assessment I wanted it to have. So I wanted it to have an essay, I wanted it to have some multiple choice questions, and then I click create. And look at that. It made an essay, it made instructions, and it made some multiple choice questions that quickly. I can download that, I can edit it, I can improve those questions. I can focus where my students need to be on modals. But Almanac made that free for me in 30 seconds. So I wanted to show you how I also use Bing Image Creator in my classroom. So here's an activity, an in-class grammar activity with Bing Image Creator. So this is a screenshot of the home page. And so you can maybe give students read students a sentence, a description. And then students have their laptops in front of them or their tablets or their phones, and they listen to you read, and then they tell Bing to create the image based on what you just described to them. And then you can take a look at their images. They can take a look at their images. How accurate is the image that Bing created from their description? If there's something wrong with the image, you can go back and look at what your students typed to see, did they spell something wrong? Did they put the adjective in the wrong location? Um, did they hear you wrong? And so you can assess students' listening ability, students' grammar skills, their spelling by having them create images in Bing. Another option is to create an image in Bing and show it to your students. And then students write a description of that image. So this works really well with adjectives. And it works really well with sentence structure. And then once they write that description of the image, they type it into Bing and let Bing create an image for them. Then they can compare the image they made with the image you made. How are they similar? How are they different? Why do they think it is similar or different? Is it something about the way they wrote their sentence? Or is it something that Bing chose to do? Was there a misunderstanding of meaning or a misunderstanding of appropriateness between what they wanted and what they got? So here's another activity. Get students to try creating images using different verb tenses. So this is one that I did to share with you. I typed in the sentence, a bear is chasing a rabbit. On the right, that's what being created. Then I typed in, a bear used to chase a rabbit. On the left, that's what being created. It allows students to see how changing the form can change the meaning. So on the left, the bear has caught the rabbit. On the right, the bear is still in the process of chasing the rabbit. So they can see the differences. When I change the form, this is how it affects meaning. So, what about you? How have you used AI to boost your teaching, to assist your teaching? What AI tools have you tried? Can you share in the chat any AI tools you have tried, either as a individual or as a teacher? What AI tools have you tried? Alzra asked, is it free? Everything I'm sharing with you today is free. I have used Grammarly with classrooms of 50 or 60 students. I can take their writing samples and put them into Grammarly. Grammarly can very quickly give me a underline things that are misspelled or that have punctuation errors, and that helps me to grade large amounts of writing. So that works with large classrooms. Andrea has used ChatGPT and Grammarly. Awesome. I would love to hear your thoughts on those tools. What has worked well and what hasn't? It looks like for many people, these tools are new. I've used Grammarly for a little while. They've improved a lot very quickly. But most of these tools I've only used for a few months. Oh, that's right. Quiz is. You can now create a quiz using AI. Thank you, Sylvia. I just saw that. I haven't used it yet, but I did play around with it a week or so ago. I'll be leading a workshop in November, and I thought about quizzes, and I saw their new AI tools. Yes, Andrea, I did see that Jamboard is being phased out next year. I've used Jamboard with lots of my online classes. Quizalize. Brenda, that's new. I have got to go look that one up now. Quizlet. Yep. And a lot of these tools we've been using maybe for a year or two, and those tools now have AI added to them. So I've used Canva since maybe 2020. And now Canva has Magic Write and Canva has AI image creators and all that kind of thing built into the tool that I've been using for several years. So things like Quizlet and Quizzes are adding AI. This is great. I'm so glad you guys are sharing your tools with us, the tools that you've chosen. So let's think through how we can use these newer social media tools with your students. We've had Facebook, goodness, 20 years, I think now. But there's so many social media platforms that our students are using now. So how can we use those to enhance our grammar teaching? So there's several advantages to using social media. It can engage your students and it can make learning more relevant to their interests because they're already on their phones or their tablets. Social media can provide students with lots of opportunities to practice their English skills in real world contexts for them. And social media can help students to connect with other English speakers from around the world. Social media can be used to create a more interactive, more collaborative learning environment outside of your classroom and inside your classroom. But there's definitely some disadvantages. Social media can be distracting in your classroom, it can be disruptive to learning. Social media can be used to spread misinformation or fake news, and it can be used for hate speech. Social media can be addictive, and it can be difficult to monitor your students' social media activity. So, here's some tips for teaching grammar with social media. Um, how can we be effective grammar teachers and use social media wisely and responsibly? So, first, we need to think about the right social media platforms. Not all social media platforms are created equal. Some platforms like Twitter and Instagram are better for short form writing, so writing short sentences, tweets, and communication, while other platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn are better suited for longer writing or back and forth discussions. So it's important that we think about the right platform for our students and for what grammar we're teaching. So you also want to set clear expectations for your students. Students should know how to use social media responsibly in the classroom. So this includes being respectful of other people, staying away from cyberbullying, and learning not to share any of their personal information online. As much as you can, if you're going to use social media in the classroom, you need to be able to monitor their social media activity. It's important to monitor their social media activities to be sure that they're using it safely and responsibly inside your classroom. You can do this by having students share their social media accounts with you. I also suggest having a work account so that you are not sharing your private social media platforms and handles with your students, but instead you have a work account that you share with your students so that you can monitor their media use in your classroom. Social media is a good tool, but just like with AI, it's not to replace you or to replace your teaching expertise. Social media can enhance your teaching, but it should never replace your teaching. So make sure that you add in other best practices for teaching grammar, such as discussions, um, writing assignments, things that you know are going to work for helping your students adjust to new grammar forms. So let's think about some different ideas for social media platforms that are popular right now. Instagram is one of them. Some ways that I've used Instagram in my grammar classroom. I've asked students to correct famous people's posts. Many times, your students are following celebrities, they're following actors and actresses, musicians and singers, athletes. And so grabbing some of their tweets or some of their posts from Instagram and correcting their grammar is one way that you can keep your students engaged and talking and using their English skills and having a good time while focusing on form. You can also get your students to help you translate the online lingo into more academic language. We all know that we write differently when we're writing on Instagram than when we do in person. So, using things like LOL, LMAO, SMH, all of those short form words that we use online. Get your students to put that into academic English. Take it from an Instagram post and put it in an email to your boss. How would you change that? How would you translate it from its online short form to a more professional or academic writing? You can also create a class account. I've done this with my students before, and make posts on that class account. And you can also use Instagram to create quizzes so that your students can respond to your post, your questions in real time using their phones. And that's a great way to get them engaged using a platform that they already have knowledge of. So that's also something that's kind of nice. You don't have to teach them how to use Instagram. What about Reddit? That's another platform that, oops, excuse me. That's another platform that is very popular now. Reddit is a platform that where people share ideas, they share memes, they share um, stories and things like that, and talk them through. So one thing you could do is ask your students to write a new caption for a meme on Reddit. Or you can ask your students to make a meme based on something that you read to them or something that they listen to. You can also get your students to comment on memes. This is something where they can do it in Reddit. You would want to decide as a teacher whether or not that posting their comments on Reddit is really the best idea. Otherwise, you can have them write their comments on the board in the classroom or put their comments in a Google Docs, that kind of thing, to practice their English skills. So here's one example. With this image from Reddit, it's an Animal Crossing image. Students could add a comment using a particular form, such as asking your students to use emphatic language. Maybe you want your students to use comparatives and superlatives to comment on this Reddit post. They could write a caption for this image and share it as a comment once it's polished, once it's revised in class. And this image could be described in a lot of ways. You could use descriptive adjectives and then you could assess your students' use of adjective placement. You could focus on present progressive, and students don't have to actually share what they write um, in Reddit. They can use a Google folder and share their captions or their comments there. And that gives you the same kind of information while keeping your students' privacy safe. TikTok is another platform that's really popular right now. Um, so here's some ideas on using TikTok in your grammar classroom. There are tons of videos where people are teaching you how to do things on TikTok. They're teaching you how to cook, how to exercise, how to dance, how to, parent. There's all kinds of TikToks that you can use to have your students follow directions in class. That's the command form. Your students are also going to be listening to the different kinds of modals, what they should and should not do. Sharing a TikTok and asking your students to follow directions is a lot like TPR, or total physical response. That is a teaching method that I've used, goodness, for years and years and years in my grammar classroom. So you can use a TikTok that shares how to make something simple. A lot of life hack videos on TikToks are really good ways to get your students to make something while they listen to a TikTok, while they watch a TikTok. And it's a good way to gauge their understanding of the command form, of their listening skills, of their understanding of modals, when they watch and follow directions. Students can also demonstrate their ability to use the command form and modals and adjectives by making their own life hack TikTok. So get them to create their own. They can share something they did or something they made via TikTok. Many artists, writers, bakers do this. So this would use the first person. So what I did. You can have them use both simple and more complex past tenses, and get them to use plenty of adjectives to describe something they made in a TikTok. Additionally, watching TikToks in class and commenting on those TikToks, even if you don't post them, can help your students practice their writing, their thinking skills. So, for example, how do you write a critical comment politely in English? How do you give advice on a TikTok politely, or friendly in English? And finally, when you, as the teacher, are scrolling through TikTok outside of work, you can save videos that have examples of the grammar points you want to make in class. I do this a lot. There are several creators that are very funny, and watch them for a good laugh. And sometimes I'll hear them use a grammar form over and over and over again. And I think, I'm going to play this video in class tomorrow, and I save it and we watch it in class and we talk about how the influencer used that form and what it means and why they used it in class the next day. So anytime it shares a grammar point, you can share that with your students. You can ask comprehension questions about a TikTok. You can analyze their speaking or their writing, or how their speaking matches or does not match what they see in the video. And you can point to the grammar in a real life situation so students get to see grammar in use. I know Facebook is old. I really like Facebook. I've used Facebook a lot with my language students. One thing that I've done, I have gone on Facebook Live after class to review for an upcoming grammar test. So, I'll create a PowerPoint with the types of questions they're going to see on tomorrow's exam. And just like I'm doing right now, I'll present them outside of class, and my students can log on their phones wherever they are, and they can put comments in the chat. And so that helps them prepare for an upcoming grammar quiz or an upcoming exam in grammar class. I have also, instead of going live, I will post maybe every 30 or 45 minutes for a couple of hours in a Facebook group that is just for me and my students. Um, and I may put pictures or videos and ask students to answer questions in the comment section of the post. And so that gives them the opportunity to review for their grammar test outside of class, which, yay, I wanted them to study. So now I know they are. And then they can also ask questions in the chat box of a Facebook Live, and I can respond right away. Or they can leave comments and I can respond to those comments. And then everybody in class gets to see the answer to a question, and they can all use that information to prepare for an upcoming grammar test. So I use Facebook a lot just because it's a platform that I enjoy. So AI doesn't have to be a tool that students use negatively, um, or a tool that students use to get around the grammar rules or get around having to learn the form. AI can be something that students can use to enhance their grammar learning. It can be used to enhance their classroom behavior. You may just want to rethink some of your assignments or use AI inside the classroom where students can be monitored to be sure they're using it responsibly. So consider AI as a way to enhance your instruction. Don't let your learners get behind their friends who maybe in their science classes or their math classes or their business classes, they're already using AI. Teach them instead in your English class how to be responsible and use AI to improve their grammar, to use AI and social media to improve their writing and their thinking skills as they use social media and AI responsibly. We know that other classrooms are using AI. We know that students are playing around with AI outside of class. So use this as an opportunity to teach your students how to use it responsibly for the workplace and for society. Good workers will soon need to use AI in the workplace. So, but remember, you are the expert. You're the teacher. AI and social media are just tools. They're not your decision makers. You can use them to assist you in content development and grading, but they're not going to replace your expertise or the relationships that you build with your students and with their families. And so, as you explore social media platforms using AI, consider where you currently face the most difficulty, challenge, to use a word from our chat, in teaching grammar. What tense is it? What kind of usage or form is the hardest to teach or is the most difficult for your students to master? And start there in looking for ways to use social media and looking for ways to use AI to support you in your instruction. So I'd like to hear from you. How have you used social media in your teaching? Have you used it as an example in the classroom? Do you get on social media with your students? Do you learn about new teaching tools on social media? What role does social media play in your teaching? Right now, you're learning on Facebook Live, so that's one way. How else have you used social media to assist in your teaching? Share in the chat. Oh, John, collaborative learning. Yes, I use Google a lot for collaborative learning. I also used a Facebook group, and my students posted their thesis statements for an essay they were working on, and then other students could reply to those comments and help them improve their thesis statements. So I've definitely used social media for more collaborative learning projects. WhatsApp. Yes, I need to get better at using WhatsApp. I'm not very good at it, but I love that you are already using that in your teaching. DID for making educational videos. Ooh, I need to look that up. I'm not familiar with that. Videos from VOA. Yes, they are so very useful. I've used those several times in my classrooms. Thank you, Karima. That's really good. Good reminder to go to the VOA website. Yes, IG photos to describe the appearance of famous people. That's a really good idea, Andrea. Especially if you can find some pictures that you can compare. Maybe there's two different clothing styles, or maybe one person is tall and one person is short, and you can make those comparisons. While you are responding in the chat, I'll come back. Oh, Powtoon, Catherine, yes, I used that one semester in an English class for adults. It was a lot of fun. So while you're adding to the chat, I just want to remind you that tomorrow at 2 p.m. on Zoom, we'll meet together and talk about more AI tools that I've used, that you've used. We'll try some out together and get some ideas for how to use AI and social media in different kinds of classrooms, collaboratively, large classrooms, online classrooms, classrooms with young learners in them. Let's meet together on Zoom tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss that. Please join me. And the link will be on the Relo Andes Facebook page. Nahad has used Facebook groups as well. The link is going to be on the Relo Andes Facebook page. It's going to be as a separate post. The link may go into the chat as well. Super Teacher Tools. That's a new one. I've got to look that up. Yes, we'll definitely post that Zoom link very soon, and we'll meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining me today on this Relo Andes webinar on Tech Smart Grammar, teaching with AI and social media. Thank you so much for coming and participating. If you want more information about uh, today's topic, you can go to americanenglish.state.gov. You can always visit the Relo Andes Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter account at Relo Andes to find out about all the upcoming webinars, Zoom calls, and get more information about how to improve your instructional techniques in the classroom. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining me. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Bye.